Welcome to Empathy Stories, where we celebrate the extraordinary power of kindness and how small acts can ripple into life-changing miracles. Today's heartwarming story brings us to a small-town diner, where a single act of generosity on Christmas transformed not only one life, but a whole community. Stay tuned for this inspiring tale. The snow fell softly over the quiet streets of Evergreen Hills, painting the town in a pristine white blanket that shimmered under the glow of streetlights. It was nearly Christmas, and the small town was alive with holiday spirit. Wreaths adorned doorways, and the scent of pine and cinnamon wafted from the quaint Emily Walker. The festive. Emily owned a small diner, tucked away on the edge of town, a place she and her late husband, Michael Evergreen Diner, was a cozy. Inside the diner, the warmth of the space clashed with Emily's mounting anxiety. She stood behind the counter, her hands busy wiping down the same spot for the third time that day. The bills piled up in front of her were impossible to ignore. The rent was due in less than a week, and the money in the register wasn't enough to cover even the utilities. Emily glanced at the small photo of Michael she kept by the cash register. His face, always warm and full of life, stared back at her. He had been her rock, her dreamer, the one who believed that the diner could be more than just a business. It could be a community hub, a place where everyone felt welcome. Since losing him in a car accident 2 years earlier, Emily had struggled to keep his dream alive. But lately, she wasn't sure she could. The soft jingle of the bell above the door startled her out of her thoughts. She looked up to see a man stepping inside, shaking the snow off his shoulders. He was tall and thin, his clothes worn and his face pale with exhaustion. The way he moved, slow and hesitant, made Emily's heart ache. He looked like someone who had been through too much for too long. "Excuse me," he said, his voice low and hoarse, as if it hadn't been used in days. "I don't mean to bother you, but I was wondering if you might have some food to spare. I can't pay, but I'm willing to work for it." Emily's chest tightened. The man's eyes, though tired, held a glimmer of pride. He wasn't begging, but he was desperate. She thought of Michael and the stories he used to tell about his time in the service, how acts of kindness from strangers had kept him going when he felt lost. Emily knew she couldn't turn the man away, no matter how tight things were for her. "Sit down," she said gently, motioning to a booth by the window. "I'll bring you something warm." The man hesitated, his eyes searching hers for sincerity. Before nodding and sinking into the booth, Emily headed to the kitchen, her mind racing. She didn't have much, but she could whip up a bowl of soup and some bread. It wasn't fancy, but it would fill his stomach and warm him up. She returned a few minutes later with a steaming bowl of chicken noodle soup and a thick slice of homemade bread. "Here you go," she said, setting the plate in front of him. "Eat as much as you need." The man looked up at her, his eyes glistening. "Thank you," he whispered. "You don't know what this means to me." Emily smiled softly, trying to hide the lump forming in her throat. "Just take your time," she said, retreating to the counter to give him space. As the man ate, Emily watched him from a distance. He devoured the food like someone who hadn't had a proper meal in weeks. But there was a gentleness to his movements, a care in the way he wiped the corners of his mouth with the napkin she had provided. He finished the soup and sat back with a contented sigh, his shoulders relaxing for the first time since he'd walked through the door. When he approached the counter to thank her, Emily shook her head. "You don't owe me anything," she said firmly. "Just pay it forward when you can." The man stared at her for a moment, his expression a mixture of gratitude and something she couldn't quite place. Then, he reached into his pocket and pulled out a small, weathered coin. "I don't have anything else to give," he said, his voice breaking slightly. "But I want you to have this." He placed the coin on the counter and turned to leave before Emily could protest. She watched as the door closed behind him, the bell jingling softly in his wake. Curious, she picked up the coin. It was an old military challenge coin, worn smooth from years of handling. On one side was an insignia she didn't recognize, but the other side bore a faint engraving, courage and honor. Emily's breath caught in her throat. Michael had carried a coin just like this during his time in the military. She turned it over in her hand, Memories of her husband flooding her mind. Could this man have known Michael? Or was it just a coincidence? She looked out the window, hoping to catch another glimpse of him. But he was already gone, his figure swallowed up by the falling snow. For the rest of the evening, Emily couldn't shake the feeling that this encounter meant something more. The words engraved on the coin seemed to echo in her mind, reminding her of the values Michael had lived by. She tucked the coin into her pocket, feeling its weight as a strange comfort. Over the next few days, Emily found herself thinking about the man more often than she expected. She wondered where he had come from, what his story was, and why he had chosen her diner that day. And then there was the coin, a small token that felt impossibly significant. As Christmas approached, the streets of Evergreen Hills grew livelier. Families bustled through the town square, picking out last-minute gifts and sipping hot cocoa. But for Emily, the holiday cheer was tinged with uncertainty. The diner's struggles loomed large, and she wasn't sure how much longer she could keep it going. Yet, in the quiet moments, she found herself holding onto the coin, tracing its edges with her fingers and remembering Michael's belief in second chances. Perhaps this Christmas would bring something she couldn't yet see. Little did she know, the man would return, and when he did, he would change her life forever. The days leading up to Christmas felt like a blur for Emily. The town of Evergreen Hills was buzzing with festive cheer. But for her, it was all too much to bear. The diner's regular customers came and went, but business was slower than ever. Emily couldn't help but wonder if this year would be the one that forced her to close her doors for good. She couldn't bring herself to give up, not when so many memories of Michael were embedded in every corner of the diner. But the bills kept piling up, and her hope was slowly starting to fade. The town's Christmas festival was just around the corner, and the streets were filled with twinkling lights, wreaths, and the scent of hot chocolate. Everyone seemed to be celebrating, enjoying the season with family and friends. But Emily couldn't shake the feeling of loneliness that gripped her heart. Michael had always been the life of the party, the one who loved decorating the diner with holiday cheer and making sure every customer felt at home. But now, it was just her, and the weight of the world on her shoulders. One quiet afternoon, as Emily wiped down the counter, the familiar jingle of the doorbell rang through the air. She looked up and froze. Standing in the doorway was the man, the one she had helped weeks ago. But this time, he was different. Gone was the haggard appearance of someone desperate for food. In his place stood a man who exuded quiet confidence. His clothes freshly pressed, his hair neatly combed. His posture had transformed from hunched and weary to upright and assured. The change was striking. "Good afternoon, Miss Walker," he said, his voice calm and warm. "I hope I'm not interrupting anything." Emily blinked, still processing what she was seeing. You look different," she stammered, her heart racing. "I didn't expect to see you again. Not like this." The man smiled softly, his eyes sincere but filled with something Emily couldn't quite place. "I suppose I owe you an explanation," he said, taking a seat at the counter. "I didn't come here to deceive you, but I came searching for something I lost long ago. My name is Nathaniel Carter." Emily's breath caught in her throat. "Nathaniel Carter? As in, the billionaire entrepreneur?" she asked, disbelief rising in her voice. Nathaniel nodded, his gaze steady. "Yes, I am Nathaniel Carter, the owner of Carter Enterprises. I realize this must come as a surprise, but I thought it was important to explain myself." Emily felt her world shift. The man who had seemed so helpless, the man she had shared a simple meal with, was one of the wealthiest men in the country. Her mind struggled to catch up with the shock. She had never imagined that someone like him would choose to come into her diner, let alone seek help disguised as a homeless man. "I know this is a lot to take in," Nathaniel continued, his tone apologetic, "but I need you to understand something. For years, I've lived in a bubble, surrounded by wealth and privilege. I've accumulated everything anyone could want: money, power, influence. But in the process, I lost sight of what truly matters. I felt disconnected, empty, like I was just going through the motions. I wanted to see what it was like to live without the comforts I've always known. That's why I came to your diner, to experience kindness, to find out if it still existed in a world that felt so cold and transactional. Emily's thoughts swirled as she listened. She had never imagined that this man, this stranger who had come to her for help, was someone with so much power. She had helped him because he seemed genuine, someone who was struggling, just like so many others. And now, it felt like the rug had been pulled out from under her. "But why?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. "Why would you come to me? Why hide who you are?" Nathaniel's eyes softened. "Because, Miss Walker, you showed me something I had forgotten. You treated me with dignity, with respect, even when I was at my lowest. You didn't ask for anything in return. And that, to me, was priceless. You reminded me that kindness isn't about what you can get. It's about what you can give. It's about seeing people for who they are, not what they have." Emily felt a lump form in her throat. His words struck a chord deep inside her. She had always believed in helping others, no matter their circumstances. But this was different. This man had been living a life of excess, and yet it was her small act of kindness that had made a difference. Nathaniel continued, his voice more serious now. "I want to help you. I know you've been struggling with the diner, trying to keep it going in the face of everything. I want to offer you my support, financially and personally. I'd like to invest in your diner, help you make it thrive again. I see the potential in what you've built, and I want to be a part of that." Emily felt her breath catch. She had spent so many sleepless nights worrying about the diner, about how to keep it open without losing everything. The idea of someone, especially someone like Nathaniel Carter, offering to invest in her business was overwhelming. "I don't know what to say," she murmured, her voice trembling with the weight of the decision. "I've worked so hard to keep this place alive, but accepting help, it feels like giving up in some way." Nathaniel smiled gently. "I understand that. It's not about giving up, Emily. It's about building something better, something that honors the legacy you and your husband created. You don't have to do this alone." Emily's heart raced as she looked around the diner, the familiar checkered floors, the photos of Michael on the walls. This diner was their dream, their shared vision. But now, it felt like it was more than just a business. It was a symbol of everything they had fought for, and perhaps everything she could still fight for. "I'll think about it," Emily said softly. "But I can't promise anything." Nathaniel nodded, understanding. "Take your time. This is a big decision, but know that the offer is real. And no matter what you decide, I'm grateful for what you've shown me. You've reminded me of what really matters." He stood up and placed a small, crumpled envelope on the counter. "This is just a token of my gratitude. It's not much, but I want you to know how much your kindness meant to me." Emily looked at the envelope, her hands trembling as she reached for it. She opened it slowly, her breath catching in her chest when she saw what was inside. It was a check, enough to cover her bills for the next few months, enough to give her some breathing room. She looked up at Nathaniel, her eyes wide. "This is too much. I can't accept this," she said, her voice shaking. Nathaniel smiled. "It's not charity, Emily. It's a thank you for reminding me that there is still good in the world, for showing me that kindness is more valuable than all the wealth I've accumulated." As he turned to leave, Emily stood frozen, the weight of his words settling deep in her heart. This was more than just an offer of money. It was a reminder of what could happen when people chose to see one another, when they chose to care. The days after Nathaniel's visit felt like a whirlwind for Emily. She spent hours turning the envelope over in her hands, contemplating what to do. It was a lot of money, a lifeline, but accepting it felt like she would be accepting defeat, something she had sworn she would never do. She had always prided herself on making her own way. But now, with the pressure of keeping the diner open, she realized she couldn't do it alone. As Christmas Eve approached, the diner became busier. The holiday lights outside twinkled brightly against the snowy streets, and the scent of gingerbread and freshly brewed coffee filled the air. The town of Evergreen Hills was in full swing, celebrating the festive season. But inside the small diner, there was a quiet sense of hope. People came in not just for the food, but for the warmth that seemed to emanate from Emily's little restaurant. Word had spread about the kindness she had shown to the stranger. And slowly, The diner began to feel like a gathering place for people who needed more than just a meal. That evening, just as Emily was preparing to close, the door jingled again. She looked up, and there, standing in the doorway, was Nathaniel. This time, he was dressed casually, his warm eyes meeting hers across the room. There was a calmness about him now, a confidence that hadn't been there before. "Good evening, Emily," he said, his voice filled with warmth. "I hope I'm not intruding." Emily smiled, trying to mask the uncertainty in her heart. "Not at all," she replied. "It's a quiet night, but we've been busy. What brings you back here?" Nathaniel walked over to the counter, sitting down with a soft sigh. He looked around, admiring the cozy, familiar atmosphere of the diner. "I've been thinking about our last conversation," he said. "I realize I may have overwhelmed you with my offer, but after thinking about it, I've come to understand something important." Emily wiped her hands on her apron, her heart racing. She had spent so much time in her own head, debating what to do. "What is it?" she asked, genuinely curious. "I want to help you, Emily," Nathaniel said earnestly. "I see what you've built here. It's more than just a business. It's a community. People come here for warmth and connection, not just food. I want to help you make this place thrive. I'm not just talking about money. I'm talking about support. I want to partner with you, work alongside you to make this diner a place where people can truly feel at home." Emily felt a lump form in her throat. This wasn't just about the money. It wasn't about saving the business. It was about something more profound. Nathaniel had seen the heart of what she had created, and now he wanted to help her nurture it. It was the opportunity she had been waiting for, though she hadn't known it until now. "I don't know what to say," Emily whispered, her eyes brimming with tears. "I've struggled so much to keep this place open. I didn't want to give up, but it's been hard." Nathaniel smiled gently, his eyes full of understanding. "I know. I've seen that, and I believe in you. You don't have to do this alone anymore." The weight of his words sank in, and for the first time in months, Emily felt a sense of relief wash over her. She wasn't alone. She didn't have to carry the burden of saving the diner by herself. Nathaniel wasn't just offering a business deal. He was offering her a second chance. A chance to do what she loved without constantly worrying about survival. "I'm ready," Emily said, her voice steady now. "I'm ready to make this place what it deserves to be. A place where people can come and find hope, just like I did all those years ago." Nathaniel's face lit up with a smile. "That's the spirit. Together, we can make this diner into something truly special." As they stood there, talking about their plans for the future, Emily felt something shift inside her. It wasn't just the promise of financial support. It was the realization that kindness, connection, and the willingness to help each other were the things that truly mattered. The diner, which had once been a symbol of loss and struggle, was now becoming a place of hope and renewal. The snow outside continued to fall, gently blanketing the town in a layer of white. Inside the diner, the warmth of the holiday spirit filled every corner. Emily knew that Christmas had come early this year, not because of the decorations or the food, but because of the new beginning that lay ahead. The next few weeks passed quickly, with Emily and Nathaniel working together to breathe new life into the diner. Nathaniel's investment helped stabilize the business. But more than that, he helped Emily redefine what the diner could be. They revamped the menu, hired new staff, and even started hosting community events that brought people from all walks of life together. Christmas Day arrived, and the diner was bustling with activity. The tables were filled with families, friends, and neighbors, all gathered to share a meal and celebrate the season. Emily stood behind the counter, her heart full of gratitude as she watched the people who had become part of her diner story. It wasn't just about serving food anymore. It was about creating a space where people could connect, where kindness was the main ingredient in every dish. As the evening drew to a close, Emily stood at the counter, her eyes filled with joy. The diner was thriving, and she knew that the best was yet to come. She glanced over at Nathaniel, who had been quietly observing the magic unfold. "Thank you," Emily said softly, her voice filled with emotion. "Thank you for believing in me, for giving me a second chance." Nathaniel smiled warmly. his eyes meeting hers with quiet understanding. You did this, Emily. You brought this place back to life. I just helped you see it. And as the snow continued to fall outside, the lights of the diner flickered softly in the night, casting a glow that seemed to reflect the warmth of the season. For Emily, it was no longer just about saving the diner. It was about something much greater. It was about finding hope, purpose, and connection in the most unexpected of places. Merry Christmas. May this season fill your heart with joy, reminding you that kindness can change lives, and new beginnings are always possible. Where in the world are you watching from today? I'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments. Thank you for joining us on this journey of compassion, resilience, and hope. Emily's story reminds us of the profound impact of kindness and the possibilities that arise when we open our hearts to others. If this story touched you, please like, share, and subscribe to Empathy Stories. Tell us where you're watching from and what this story means to you in the comments below. Until next time, may your days be filled with kindness and new beginnings. Merry Christmas.